Hello everybody, welcome back to Planet X News. This is Scott from the Nibiru channel. I have some very eye-popping information for all of you today, and this is concerning the magnitude 7.8 earthquake that occurred in New Zealand back in November of 2016. Now, there's been some evidence uncovered by geologists and scientists pertaining to this particular earthquake. And what I'm about to show you is the reason why I talk about earthquakes and dealing with the entire Planet X issue. The issue being that the tugging and pulling on our Earth, the internal heating of the Earth's core, will cause eventually catastrophic earthquakes. Earthquakes that are so devastating, they could actually create mountain ranges in a matter of minutes. They can actually take away portions of land and make them completely disappear. And this is actually what occurred in November of 2016 in New Zealand. Not only did this occur in New Zealand, but this was completely downplayed around the world. And how do I know this? Because within minutes of this earthquake hitting in New Zealand, I was notified and started looking into the information almost immediately. Within 48 hours, it seemed like the information was being, well, I don't want to use the word covered up, but there wasn't too much media dedicated to what occurred in New Zealand. Maybe it's because there wasn't a mass loss of life. But what did occur there on that late evening in November of 2016 was devastating. Devastating beyond belief. And now, all of these months later, the evidence is coming out. And again, the reason why I warn people of the possibilities of these earthquakes and dealing with these large coronal holes on the sun, when we take a look at the information that's been provided, you're going to see something that you've probably never seen before. In all of my years paying attention to earthquake activity around the earth, I've never seen anything like this until I saw some of the footage from New Zealand a few days after the earthquake. So we're going to go ahead and get into this information because it is just absolutely wild looking at this. Now, this article comes from The Watchers, and their website is absolutely fantastic. I'll leave a link to this article, and I would bookmark this website, The Watchers. Just absolutely fantastic. I refer to it just about every day. This article goes into talking about this earthquake. It states that the Kaikoura earthquake, the most complex in modern history. Now, this just came out yesterday, March 24th, 2017. And we're going to take a look at this photograph right here. Now, you can see two gentlemen standing there. They are probably scientists or geologists, and they are looking at this elevation that just popped up out of the ground, or the other portion sunk. Either way, it has totally changed the landscape of this portion, which basically looks like an uninhabited area, thank God. Now, if this would have occurred in a heavily populated area or a city underneath buildings, then the loss of life would have been much, much greater. I think only a few people lost their life in the 7-point magnitude earthquake in New Zealand. But what they're now finding is pretty startling. We'll just read a few lines from this article. And like I said, I'll leave a link to this and you could read everything completely. It says in November of 2016, a massive 7.8 magnitude earthquake hit New Zealand, causing significant damage, between 80,000 and 100,000 landslides. Now, an international team of scientists says that the earthquake was so complex and unusual that it is likely to change how scientists think about earthquake hazards in plate boundary zones around the world. According to their study, the heavy shaking in the so-called Kaikoura quake was amassed by ruptures on at least 12 different faults, in some cases so far apart that they were thought to be immune to each other's influence. Whenever I read the rest of this article, I was pretty amazed because, once again, a lot of this information did not make its way around the world. The most everyone knew is that there was a pretty big earthquake in New Zealand and only a few people were injured. A couple of people did lose their lives. But they really didn't put this out there after a survey was done of the damage. You would see little drips and drabs of it. But now, all of these months later, they're talking about what occurred and what happened. Now, there's two little video clips pertaining to what happened there. And we're going to go ahead and play them. And if you take a look at the beginning of this video and take a look at this crack all the way through, it just keeps going and going and going. And like I said, it's only by the grace of God that this occurred in mostly a rural area. Because if this would have occurred in a heavily populated area, it would have probably been completely destroyed beyond recognition. And once again, whenever I warn people of earthquakes and being prepared, this is the reason why. You're not going to get any type of advanced notice. This is just going to occur. And this earthquake happened in the middle of the night while people were sleeping. And that too can be very, very devastating and alarming. Being woken up as the land is lifting directly underneath the structure that you are living in and sleeping in, having nowhere to run to, it would be devastating. But we're going to go ahead and play a quick clip of this. And all this is a drone flying over this very large fault, crack, fissure, whatever you want to call it. It just looks absolutely hideous from above. And as you can see, it travels on and on and on. And what you don't really see because of depth perception is how high, if you were actually standing on the ground, that is several meters high or several feet high, meaning the land rose and sunk at the same time. So if you were standing down inside of this crack or this fissure, you would basically disappear. You're looking at about 16 to 20 feet, possibly even more. You can see the size of that man standing there in the video. He looks to be approximately 6 feet tall. So if you place him down inside of that crack, this crack is actually over his head. And this fissure just goes on and on and on. Now, we're going to go ahead and move to another video clip. Now, again, this goes into more of the scientific aspect of their research and their findings. Now, this portion of video is what really caught my eye. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're looking at here, this was once a beach, a regular beach with a little coastal roadway that went all along the coastline. This piece of land that you see right here actually was the ocean bottom. This piece of land was not there the day before this earthquake. It was not there. Now, it is a permanent land mass. in the middle of this beach. Amazing. Amazing at the devastation and the changing of the land that an earthquake can produce. And that's why I am so worried about the entire state of California. If something like this would occur under any of the major cities in the state of California, it would be total mass devastation. The USGS has come out last month warning of a 7.4 or greater magnitude earthquake to hit California. So what is to say that something like this occurs in the city of Los Angeles or San Francisco? We all saw the devastation back in, I believe it was Oakland, California, and San Francisco many, many years ago. That was just absolutely total devastation. And one of the biggest problems is underground gas lines. Once that type of earthquake hits, the gas lines rupture, they create fires, and then a totally different type of hazard. But let's take a few minutes and let's listen about what happened on this beach, because now the ocean bottom rose up and is now a permanent fixture on this beach. But let's listen.
Standing here in the Papatia Fault, a few kilometres south of the Clarence River Bridge on the Kaikoura coast. Looking here at the fault plane, the plane of movement along the fault itself, where this side here has moved up by about 1.5 metres, and we can see the gravels here and the gravels on that side. But what's really interesting is that we can see lines of movement here on this fault plane, which are moving down a little bit in this fashion. And that means we can see, it looks impressive that we're standing here 1.5 metres high, but in fact most of the movement has been along a plane something like this. So this side here has moved forwards by many, many metres. These fault scarps form very, very quickly. And we know from earthquake physics that probably this fault scarp ruptured across here at a speed of about 3 kilometres a second. So this has uplifted a very large area of new reef here, and the locals here describe not the earthquake noise, but the noise of water running off the top of this uplifted platform here. They said that the noise was just horrendous. And on the downthrown side of the fault, it's actually still even come up by about 1.5 metres. On the other side, there's as much as 6 metres of uplift.
So ladies and gentlemen, if you take a look, we'll just jump back here a little bit. If you take a look at the height of this man's probably about 6 foot tall, maybe 6'1". Take a look at how much land rose out of the ocean and is now a permanent land structure on this beach. It totally changed everything. Now, there are other reports that have come out pertaining to this situation, and they're very scientific, and they use some satellites to take some imagery of the 2 islands that make up the country of New Zealand. And there's a small gap between them. Now, it is reported that they are actually closer together. That's how much of a landmass rocked this island country. So whenever I do talk about earthquakes, or I produce a video pertaining to earthquake activity, I would watch it. I would watch it, because there is going to be critical information within that video and a warning. Now, currently, we are under a situation dealing with, once again, these coronal holes appearing on the sun and producing very high solar winds. I'm going to be looking at some earthquake activity within the hour and putting together a report. But this is just eye-popping that a landmass this large can just rise from the ocean bottom, and now it is a permanent land structure in New Zealand. Now, whenever I was talking about the imagery that was conducted, this shows you a little bit about the imagery that was taken by some satellites. And they were talking about how this earthquake moved side to side and then up and down. So normally when earthquakes occur, they will be either a rise in the landmass or they will slide back and forth against each other. This earthquake had everything, and that's why they are saying that this was the most complex earthquake in modern history. And since that earthquake, the small island country of New Zealand has constantly been under the threat of these earthquakes. Every single day, earthquakes are occurring in New Zealand. Every single day. Now, once again, we don't know if the magnitude of the earthquakes that are being reported are being downgraded. Now, we know that it's being conducted by the USGS because we can see the data. If a 5.8 earthquake occurs, they go down the list and they pick the smallest number and they publish that number. Well, that makes a big difference, ladies and gentlemen. If the magnitude reached 5.8, why wouldn't you report 5.8? If there were some smaller tremors that occurred seconds or minutes later that were much lower, say a 4.6, 4.8, why would you pick the lowest magnitude to report? Wouldn't you think that you would be, reporting the highest magnitude at the epicenter that created the earthquake, that produced the data on the seismic device? The only reason why you would do that would be to deceive people. So I think that things are getting very critical as far as information that we're being given on what's happening around the world. And once again, just taking a look at this is just absolutely amazing what our Earth can do to itself. And once again, take a look at the size of these men and looking up at this rise of land. And now these are all permanent structures and land masses in the country of New Zealand. Absolutely amazing. This is Scott from Planet X News. Thank you for watching. Hello everybody, welcome back to Planet X News. This is Scott from the Nibiru channel. I have some very eye-popping information for all of you today, and this is concerning the magnitude 7.8 earthquake that occurred in New Zealand back in November of 2016. Now there's been some evidence uncovered by geologists and scientists pertaining to this particular earthquake. And what I'm about to show you is the reason why I talk about earthquakes and dealing with the entire Planet X issue. The issue being that the tugging and pulling on our Earth, the internal heating of the Earth's core, will cause eventually catastrophic earthquakes. Earthquakes that are so devastating, they could actually create mountain ranges in a matter of minutes. They can actually take away portions of land and make them completely disappear. And this is actually what occurred in November of 2016 in New Zealand. Not only did this occur in New Zealand, but this was completely downplayed around the world. And how do I know this? Because within minutes of this earthquake hitting in New Zealand, I was notified and started looking into the information almost immediately. Within 48 hours, it seemed like the information was being, well, I don't want to use the word covered up, but there wasn't too much media dedicated to what occurred in New Zealand. Maybe it's because there wasn't a mass loss of life. But what did occur there on that late evening in November of 2016 was devastating. Devastating beyond belief. And now, all of these months later, the evidence